All right, so for today, we're going to talk about some Wireshark stuff. I'm also going to post an assignment out there, and the assignment is just going to basically be like, prove to me in some way that you have watched X number of DakotaCon presentations. So if you went to them, great. Basically what I'll have you do is write like a little summary thing, and I'm sure it's probably not that unfamiliar to you. So, whoops, not 2016. There we go. So if you go out to the DakotaCon YouTube channel or just the website, it should link out here. What currently is going on is each track is just like one whole recording. So if you jump roughly an hour into each one, you can move from session to session. I'm hoping sometime today to have at least bookmarks placed in there so that you can select presentations. Ideally, I'm going to break them all out, but I don't know if I'm going to have time to like be doing video editing today. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, you can check those out. There were a couple big highlight. Well, there's for sure one big. What's a good defensive security highlight of DakotaCon? There's a couple of them actually. So what did you
remember the name of the talk, but the one that Blackfield gave at 9?
Yeah, John Strand. So he demoed a couple tools. One of them was actually, it's really a challenge to track down the location of someone that's like beating on one of your systems, right? We can get the IP address of someone that's beating on our system, but does having an IP address of someone that's like attacking us really do us any good? Why doesn't that necessarily do us any good? Yeah, how could they hide their IP address? Lots of ways. A really popular one, it's a 3-letter word. Starts with T. 3-letter acronym anyway. Tor, yeah. That's a really good one. Tor's a good one for hiding yourself on the internet. Or you could just go rent like an EC2 instance on Amazon and just pop through that, and then when you're done, just delete it, right? And then when someone looks up, like, where did this come from? It's, oh, Amazon's attacking me. So that's one that could happen. So what one of the tools John talked about was Honey Badger. So, which if you just search YouTube for Honey Badger, you'll get the reference real quick. But what Honey Badger does is makes things that look like juicy targets on your systems and then actually plants a payload. It is super duper illegal if you have someone attacking you for you to do what? Attack back, yeah. Super illegal. You cannot... What law are you violating? Maybe we need a law talk. Hopefully some of you, you're like, well, that's not illegal. Well, hopefully that's not going through anyone's mind. It's the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act says does anyone know about that law? When and where that law came about? What's that? Long time ago, yeah. It came about during the Reagan era. And then the fun story is Reagan watched, oh gosh, it's a movie, War Games. Reagan watched War Games and got super paranoid and passed a law. That's the rumor that's about. Maybe it's true, I don't know. But anyway, there's this law signed in that if you don't have authorized access to a computer and you touch it, you're going to go to jail. So you cannot respond to, like if someone's trying to compromise your system, right, or attack you, they are violating CFAA. You cannot respond to a CFAA violation by violating the CFAA back, right? You can't do that. It's not like the double negative clause is okay. So legally, if someone is attacking you and you attack back and actually find out where they are, like if, let's go all the way to the point that let's say someone in this room is doing something stupid and is attacking, I don't know, sd.gov in peer. Let's take that one for example. And let's say someone at bit in peer attacks your computer back and figures out who you are and wants to prosecute. Guess what's going to happen? Yeah, the case will be dropped because although they've proven that you violated CFAA by attacking them, you're going to sit there and say, well, the only way you got information about me is by attacking my computer back. You violated that. That information is totally inadmissible, and the case will get dropped. So what Honey Badger does, yeah.
Either of you be prosecuted then?
No.
Just forgotten about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, like, if you were hacking the government of South Dakota and they file a lawsuit against you, you're not going to like countersue. I mean, you could.
So if I know
But-
I'm going to win when attacking back,
There's really no good way to win when attacking back. There's really only so if we take Constitution of the United States, there's one entity allowed to attack back. What's that? What's that? Yeah, like Department of Defense. So there's agencies within DoD, they are authorized to attack back. But people are not allowed to attack back. So that's kind of the high part of that. What Honey Badger does is hosts tools out there that look like, I don't know, a juicy VNC server or something like that. And when someone connects, as a part of the connection, it just includes a little bit of code or like a Java applet, like you found the admin page to our website that isn't password protected and you need to load a Java applet. That Java applet just takes the site survey information from your wireless. What is site survey information from your wireless card going to tell you? Where you are. How accurate is it going to be? Pretty dang accurate, yeah. So in the case of John doing his talk, he pulled up Honey Badger just on his own computer, and it was a Google Maps picture, right, with the pin. But if you think about the relative location of where he was physically standing at the time in which he ran the tool, it basically puts him pretty dang close to the stage in the playhouse. So at no point was your computer doing anything, or was I doing anything unauthorized to your computer? You're the one that downloaded the Java applet off my admin page, and you're the one that ran it. You did everything to your own computer. So that's how So John actually tells a funny story about like going to a college dorm and like finding the student that was attacking something one time and putting the fear of God in them because he tracked them down. So, but the difference is with that is admissible when you're actually doing legal stuff because you didn't attack their system. They just ran something that they thought was your stuff, but it just phoned home information about them. So, yeah, good stuff. That's a fun defensive thing. Anyway, lots of other stuff. There's also like limiting Active Directory credential leaking from Bill Vokes. That's a good defensive thing. I would just check out the schedule and see all of the good stuff in there, right? So what we're going to talk about, we did some Splunk stuff. The other thing we're going to start taking a look at is Wireshark stuff. So we'll actually be double assignmenting here-ish because we'll have a PCAP scavenger hunt, I guess, where we'll hunt through a PCAP file. What's a PCAP file? Yeah, it's a packet capture file. It's actually a specific data structure that's out there that, oh, this is fun with the thing plugged in. I have like presenter view on my computer. I never use that. So I know what's next. Usually I just have to either know or guess. So Wireshark itself, we always think of as like a packet sniffer. So a packet sniffer is like, that's what's bringing traffic off the network, right? That's what's loading it for us. Well, Wireshark has that built in. Like when you install Wireshark on your Windows computer, is it actually doing the packet capture stuff itself, or is it using something else? Yeah, it's using WinPCAP. So WinPCAP is your actual packet sniffer. Inside of other operating systems, it's probably loading up T-Shark or something like that and doing it. Either way, Wireshark itself is not really a packet capture tool. It can do it, right? But if I were feeling like, hey, this would be a good idea, I'm going to get a 10 gig network interface and try to capture like all of DSU's internet traffic, I'm not going to use Wireshark for that because Wireshark will bleed and die. It can't handle like that volume of data. The other part about Wireshark is that it has vulnerabilities in it. So it's not something you really think about, but what could we do to exploit Wireshark? I mean, like, not actually what we do. It'd be cool if I knew what you could do to blow it up, but generally speaking, who's going to be running Wireshark? Is a low privilege user going to be running Wireshark? No. Or if you're running Wireshark on like your Kali instance, you're running Wireshark as what user account? Probably the root account, right? Yeah. So if we find like there's some memory problem inside of Wireshark, and if we can send a particular type of frame that we know Wireshark's analysis engine will blow up at and give us credential, we actually can like use Wireshark, exploit a memory vulnerability, and take control of your computer. So doing Wireshark captures like live tend to be risky. It's not something you'd necessarily recommend doing. But what Wireshark is really good at is being a protocol analyzer. So when we say protocol analyzer, what does that mean that we're really doing? What's that? Looking at stuff. Yeah, I mean, basically. So what Wireshark is really good at, when you open it up, it's really good at, like, how many of you are in some sort of RE class where you're using IDA? No one? Anyone used IDA Pro before? Or just IDA in general? Or any sort of software reverse engineering? So, okay. So, could you open up like any kind of binary file in like a hex editor and actually tinker with it? You could. Is that going to be the right tool for the job? Probably not. No, that's going to be very unfun. So same thing going on here with Wireshark. Like Wireshark is literally just reading data. It's just reading frames as it sees coming off a network interface. And this is what it's got going on here, right? This is like our opening up network traffic in Notepad. Can you open a packet in Notepad? Yeah, it'd be weird to do, but it could be done. That's not going to do us any good. Which is really funny that I think Wireshark always has this view turned on down here, because those of you that have used Wireshark, do you ever use this part of the display for much of anything? Very, very, very rarely, yeah. So usually what I do is just go bloop, well, that's gone. Because it's not like something I ever want, right? So the cool thing that Wireshark does, though, is it can come all the way down here, and it basically breaks stuff out using what? What is the hierarchy that it's sort of adopting here? If we see a frame coming in on wire over a particular physical interface, what is that? Yeah. So this is actually like, it's looking at physical layer information. Now granted, for Wireshark, there's not that much physical layer information, but what's at the next layer? Yeah. What's the name of the OSI model layer? Oh, daylink. I was going to go for 2 when someone said 2, but either way, yeah. So as we go up, like, it's basically crawling up the OSI model, and it's looking at that hexadecimal data and saying like, oh, that part of that datagram, or that blob of data we have, that chunk is a MAC address, which is, before I made that go away, when we start going through here and looking, like, that little chunk of hexadecimal data is the MAC address, right? So it's able to go through and determine. Now, does Wireshark know about every single protocol? Yeah, pretty close. If you make some proprietary protocol, it's probably not going to know. It's just going to be like, it's data, I don't know. And this is kind of what's going on right here. When Wireshark is looking at this data, like this particular frame that I have anyway, it just says TCP. It's like, as far as I could decode this individual exact packet, I got as far as determining it was TCP. Then whatever else is inside of that packet, I don't know. We'll come back to like what that really means, though. Does Wireshark only work on like Ethernet, though? Let's go on an adventure. CSC438 Fall 16, that should work. Oh gosh, we don't want that. I pushed out a lab for it. There we go. Now you notice Wireshark is really, really wanting everything to be Ethernet. Is there any Ethernet data in here? It's just showing all zeros, right? What? Let's grab this one. When we look further down here, is this particular data that Wireshark is pulling apart?
Cell data?
Yeah. This is actually a GSM network that I hooked up a, I don't know, $5 radio to and started listening. Now I had to do a little love to convert just raw radio data over for Wireshark, but what actually happens is ran a piece of software, well, used GNU Radio to actually interface. GNU Radio takes in that data, sees its GSM data, and then it sends it over to Wireshark using UDP. So that's why my source and destination IP addresses are localhost, because I was just running this on my computer. But in the end, we can come down here and see that, like, this is a cell phone getting paging requests. Any guesses what a paging request usually is in a cell phone? Yeah, it's the network is paging out to the device. Your phones spend most of their life doing what we call camping, just sitting here waiting to be told something. And then eventually the network will start sending out paging requests saying, hey, wake up, do something. So what that's actually doing is scheduling a time slot for your phone to start communicating with the tower. Anyway, Wireshark doesn't just have to do network, or doesn't have to just do Ethernet. It can do all sorts of protocols. So that's what's cool about it. Basically, all it takes to add in a protocol is you just have to write like the spec in a format for Wireshark. So that actual GSM data, Mike Edema, who was one of our Decodicon speakers, he actually helped write the decoding engine for Wireshark to decode GSM data. So it was a feature that they lacked, and they were trying to decode GSM data by hand, and then they said, hey, rather than writing our own software to do this, why don't we just make Wireshark do it? Because it's pretty good at decoding data already. Then you just have to write out what the spec looks like. So we know where we use it, right? Something's broken. We're trying to figure out what's going on with it. That's usually it. However, in a security sense, is it ever, like, are we ever going to get to the point where we need to, like, open up network traffic traces and look at them? Totally. Like, if you were creating your Palo Alto rules, you will notice inside of there, there's actually there's a checkbox in there that said, when this rule fires, generate a PCAP. So literally what the Palo is doing is sitting there saying, okay, we're sitting here, you know, network traffic rules going through. If we get down to like this rule, maybe this particular rule is saying like no one should really be accessing that. Let's say our firewall has a rule allowing people to an admin interface for something. Like the accountants can get to this one server for administration stuff. But if an accountant's computer is compromised, and the compromise, you know, the malicious user's going to the admin interface, we want to look at that. So maybe what we would do is say, whenever the accounting department accesses this server's admin interface, generate a PCAP, archive that network traffic because we want to see it later on. What is seeing it later on? Like, why would that be relevant to us? So there's another acronym, IR, incident response. So like firewall logs are great, right? And everyone loved doing a Splunk lab, right? We're looking at firewall logs, seeing what's going on, looking at all the events. At a certain point, is there a limit to what's contained inside of those logs? Yeah, all those logs are telling you is that, like, this server accessed this server, and the port appears as though it's something with semantic when you Google the port, like TCP whatever that particular port would be. That appears to be something semantic does. Do we know that? Do we know for sure by looking at the logs that, like, that client talking to that server was a semantic, like, endpoint protection going out to the server? No. We just know that the ports seem to match, and that's about it. The only way for us to really tell is if we actually have a network trace and we can go in and look at it and say, like, oh, this is clearly, like, it's downloading an antivirus definition, or it's downloading a network access control definition. So that's where all of this comes in, gets really relevant for us, is actually looking at what's going on. What's the downside to capturing network traces? You got to store them somewhere. Yeah. So that gets to be a little bit iffy. That's when you look through actually your book, the term that they use for that, and I forget what chapter we've bounced around in right now, but what they refer to that as is full capture data. It's one thing to just look at logs, and that's really, really helpful, but you can't, like, in an after-the-fact sort of situation, you can't really figure out what happened. You can make some guesses, but that's about it. So that's where this comes into play. And we'll actually play around with, eventually inside of your book, there is a tool they refer to called Security Onion. Has anyone heard of Security Onion before? Yeah, Security Onion. Yeah, it's a Linux distro. It's basically like Kali we usually use in what generic context? Offensive. Security Onion we generally use in the defensive context. So Security Onion is loaded up with utilities for taking network data and, like, peeling it back and seeing what's going on inside of it. It also has fun things like snort and whatnot loaded, so it actually has signature stuff going on. You can look into it further, and then it's really good at organizing. What it actually wants to do is archive every packet of traffic. So it does, and it's pretty cool. So Wireshark can capture stuff. We maybe won't use it necessarily for that, but it's going to save all the frames and whatnot. Now, one magic question. When you put, like, on a wired network, if you put your computer, your network adapter into promiscuous mode, what does that do?
Start grabbing everything your network card sees.
Yeah. So by default, when we go in the Wayback Machine, networks were super jacked up, right? If we go way back in time, like, it was kind of an event. You do a little dance if you got your network to work. So at the time, what we would do is your network card would have a MAC address. Your network card would, like, pass all of the network data it saw, but we eventually got to the point where there's a lot of traffic on a network. So we started telling your network card to, if you receive a packet and you're not on the to address, just delete the packet, right? Just like, have you ever accidentally gotten your neighbor's mail before? Maybe, maybe not. If you get your neighbor's mail, what are you supposed to do with it? You're supposed to give it to them, right? Are you supposed to open it and look at the mail? No, that's frowned upon. But what you're supposed to do is, like, probably put it back in the post box and, let the mailman figure it out. Network cards sort of do the same thing. When network cards get a packet that's not for them, what do they normally do by default? They're not as nice as you're supposed to be, right? Yeah, they just throw it away. So what promiscuous mode does is says, turn off that checking. When you receive a packet, hand it up the stream. So it makes sense as to why we have this feature inside of network cards, because if the network card is taking in every single packet, even the junk it's not supposed to, who has to deal with it on your computer next? So think about the hardware of your computer. If your network card is supposed to be the gatekeeper to junk it doesn't need, what's the next stop, literally, like, on the bus of your computer? You're going to end up at the CPU, right? If you're on a busy network that's just receiving junk traffic, do you want to rely on Windows and your processor to get rid of all the junk? I would assume not, right? So that's why promiscuous mode is a thing. We said sometimes maybe with wired networks, we do need to actually look at all the data coming in, and we want that. However, if you go plug into a network nowadays and turn your network adapter into promiscuous mode, is it going to do anything? This is always the pro tip in life. So your network card says, I will accept all traffic sent on this network. But is it going to? So normally, if you plug into generally a switch, are you going to receive anyone else's network traffic? No, why not? Yeah, because it's not a hub, right? Hubs like, and this is the thing of FYI, if you go out and start Googling like promiscuous modi stuff, you're going to find people that are like, or even textbooks. That's like, not a big textbook fan, as you can tell from my great use of textbooks, which is why I found one that you can access for free. So there's like, there'll be information on there of like, page 1 of capturing network traffic. Well, you can capture anything when you plug it into a hub. I'm like, okay, because that's realistic. You're going to encounter a bunch of those in your life, right? I actually am on, like, have standing orders. If I ever encounter a hub, I hoard it because they don't exist. It's not like I want to use the hub for anything. It's just old crap is cool. So, yeah, the switch is not going to, which is what you're going to be plugging into, right? You're going to be plugging into a switch. It's not going to send you everyone's traffic because the switch learns everyone's MAC address. Now, are there tricks that someone can do to get the switch to send you everyone's traffic? Oh, yeah. So if you have a managed switch, you can go in and configure a mirror port. So what's a mirror port do? Yeah. So if we take, like, we've got 48 ports on this switch. Well, we're going to take port 0 and make that the mirror port. The other 47 ports, they're going to continue acting like normal, but every packet we send out one of these other ports, we're going to copy it over to that mirror port. So that's the legitimate like network administrator reason or ability to do that. What's some problems you can run into with a mirror port if you're like really, really depending on capturing all the network traffic? Bandwidth, yeah. If we have a 48 port gigabit switch, and we're saying we're going to take 47 of these ports and mirror all of their data on one of them, we could effectively, but probably not, but if you think even just ghetto math, we're taking 47 gigabit interfaces and we're trying to copy it all into one. So will mirror ports always be a 100% solution? No, because the mirror port's just going to drop the traffic eventually. Same with a lot of you probably, how many of you have built a desktop before? Your desktop computer came with a LAN, a LAN on motherboard, right? And it probably was, like, maybe if you're having a lot of fun, it was made by Huawei or Realtek. Those are really crappy network adapters. They can't handle, like, if you plug them in and they say, well, it's a gigabit connection, if you try to actually push a gigabit to them, guess what's going to happen? It's going to start dropping frames because they're crappy network adapters. What'll probably actually happen if you do it a lot is eventually your chip, your LAN controller chip will get hot and it'll just die. So there's that. That's why some network adapters are more expensive than others because some are good and others are not. So that's your lesson of the day. Is some things are good and some things are bad. But the fix, like say we're DSU in East Hall here, if we were going to do a mirror port, we have 48 port switches. But are all 48 ports gigabit? No, some of them are 10 gigabit. So we could say we want to mirror all of these gigabit ports to this one 10 gig one. We're probably not going to drop frames in at that point. But what's the downside to doing that? You ever looked at the expense of a 10 gigabit network interface? They're not real cheap. So that's the downside, is it starts to get really expensive. How about doing full network capture and Wi-Fi? Before, like everyone, because the hot topic is usually like, well, I'm just going to capture network traffic off of the Go Trojans wireless network. Can you capture traffic off our wireless network? You can capture your own. That's really easy. Why can you capture your own? Because it's going to you. You have the decryption key for it, so your computer's going to decrypt it for you. Can you capture mine? I mean, like, in a sense, you can capture the beacons. Like, you could enter the MAC address of my computer, and if you had a good antenna, you could actually capture every burst coming off of my computer, grab it, and your Wireshark will be able to see, this is Kyle's MAC address, this is the access point he's talking to, and this is some data. But you're not going to be able to see what the data is. In wireless is the MAC address is always, are they never encrypted? What's that? Even further than they don't need to be, they can't be. Same, actually on wired networks is the same. On a wired network, we cannot encrypt your MAC addresses. Why is that? If we encrypt the MAC address of a wired or wireless packet, who has to deal with the packet? Yeah. So if it's like a switch, if you're encrypting the MAC addresses and you're sending a frame over to a switch, what's the switch going to do when it receives a packet and the MAC addresses are encrypted? It's going to be like, this packet is super broke. I don't know what to do with it. And it's just going to drop it. Same with wireless stuff. The only difference is wireless stuff is in the air, right? So my computer has to send a burst over to the access point hanging up in this room. It needs to tag the MAC address on there so that that access point knows to be listening and receiving the packet. And that access point knows that I'm the one talking to it. It then uses its cryptographic stuff to verify that that was in fact true and not a lie. You could spoof and pretend to have my MAC address, but that's not going to get you my network traffic. It's going to get you a bunch of weird encrypted stuff. But yeah. So what are instances in Wi-Fi where you can capture everyone's stuff? Oh yeah, we could do a fake AP kind of thing. So if I pretended to be Go Trojans and was somehow verifying your credentials in some sort of fashion, I could capture your traffic that way. That'd be a, yeah. Now, in the grand scheme of things, what'll happen at DSU when you do that? Yeah, like Scott will hunt you down. And why is it easy to hunt down like a rogue access point, especially at DSU?
Because all these access points have additional listening antennas.
Yeah, so these access points have monitor mode antennas. And the other thing is we have a lot of access points, right? Can your cellular network place pinpoint your location? Yeah, your Verizon or AT&T or, well, that's probably about it here anyway. They can pinpoint where you are because they can triangulate your location. Your phones are actually super loud when they're talking out, so everyone can hear you. So they can pinpoint your location. Is wireless any different? No, like so long as we have roughly, I'm curious why the search is taking 3 days. But anyway, as long as we have 3 access points, here we go. Let's find, okay, iPhone. Gee, what do you know? I'm in East Hall 105. How did it know that? Should be able to go down.
The East Hall 105 access point.
Oh no! The crux of the internet. The unloading image. What should happen... Oh, there we go. So it even knows that I'm roughly in the front of the room, right? Front and center, as it should be. So, yeah. Based on the triangulation of our access points, we can actually figure out where we are. So if you spin up a rogue access point, you're going to get discovered very, very quickly. And not only are you going to be discovered, you're going to be like physically located with a reasonable degree of accuracy. Now on our building maps, we actually did a really terrible job of placing the APs. So every once in a while, like I might be on 2nd floor and my location will be right about here, which would be an unfortunate place to be because I'd be hanging out outside the building. But either way, From a wireless perspective, though, that can all be discovered really easily. The other cool thing is if there is noise going on, what kind of things would detect noise or cause noise on a wireless network?
Printers?
Little bit, I suppose.
Transfer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, some printers are more evil than others. Well, they're all pretty evil, right? All printers are evil, but there are two really big culprits for interfering with wireless: microwave oven, and the other one is cordless phones. So cordless phones, like, they have to use ISM bands to communicate. So they're using the same frequency as wireless, so we can pick that up. How about microwaves?
Same frequency that wireless waves are on.
Yeah. So your microwave oven, when it's like sending its laser beams into your popcorn, it's actually sending a 2.4 gigahertz radio wave. That's how it's generating it. So we can actually, through our wireless controller, pinpoint all the microwaves on campus. So, because they cause interference. Same with all the cordless phones. Anyway, so that's why you don't do nasty things on big wireless networks, because you can be found really quickly. So there is, I'll just do this. There is eventually, if you connect Wireshark to lots and lots of data, you're eventually going to blow it up. Wireshark will initially buffer everything inside of, where you suppose it stores stuff by default when it's loading data? RAM. Wireshark is one of those things to where, unlike running, well, let's pick on Firefox and Chrome, right? Eventually, like, Chrome has a limit to how much RAM it's going to use, right? I mean, sometimes it doesn't look like it has a limit, but eventually it's like, okay, I've got enough data loaded into my memory buffer. Or you close some tabs, right? And then Chrome releases a memory back. With Wireshark, is that going to be the case? Because what's Wireshark sitting there doing? If you're running it, using it to capture data anyway. It's just constantly collecting more and more and more data. So what it's doing is it has a RAM cache that it uses, and it'll try to use up all of your memory. And depending on how you have it configured, Wireshark will exhaust the RAM of your computer. And if you don't have it configured to flush its memory buffer, it'll just crash. You'll literally get a dialogue. If you search deep within my Twitter history, you will find I have screenshots of like, Wireshark ran out of memory, and it's like the we're done message. Like, it's this show is over with. So Wireshark will capture memory, store it in its memory cache until the memory cache can't grow any longer. It's out of memory, show's over. You can also configure it, though, to flush to the hard drive. Why would you want to do that? All right, if you have lots of disk space, let's flush all that stuff out to the hard drive so that we can keep going. What's the downside to flushing Wireshark stuff out to your hard drive? Yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of writes, and we could be in a instance to where we trying to search through data. It's going to take a long time because we're waiting on your disk, and it'll actually start thrashing your disk around a little bit. So let's do Let's take a look at this. Not this. Or that. I closed it. Okay. So in D2L, there's a PCAP file. We're going to play around in that. How many of you, how about this? I assume most of you have used Wireshark, right? Everyone's used Wireshark at some point? Okay. So what we'll do is I'll open up this one. I think this is the same thing I just uploaded. So what I'm going to show you is some rough, like, things inside of Wireshark. 'Cause it's a generic thing I've discovered that most folks using Wireshark have used this part of the interface, and that's about it. Maybe that is or isn't the case. But there's stuff in here that is going to make life a lot easier. So if we grab that, There's, what do we have, 14,000-ish packets? Yeah, almost 15,000 packets here. In the grand scheme of things, that's actually not a lot. But I mean, 15,000 is a lot. But when you're actually doing big network traces and stuff like that, 15,000 is pretty tame. So it can occur, I guess, that you'll have instances where someone like is basically going to hand you just a PCAP file and say, what's going on here? And that's more or less what our assignment's going to be. There would be questions about, like, can you find this information or that information? It's literally a what's going on here kind of thing going on. So there's a statistics menu inside of Wireshark that can get us a lot of interesting information. If we go to protocol hierarchy, if we want to know what's actually going on inside of here, it breaks it down for us. So when it comes out, or comes down to it, 99.2% of the packets were IP4, right? Is that unexpected? No, that's awfully common. 98% of the packets are TCP. Is that uncommon? Kind of expected. When we're really talking about what's going on here is when we get down into Wireshark was able to determine that these particular things were taking place. So inside of TCP, 98% of the traffic was TCP. We saw some of the traffic was secure socket layer. What's SSL? Yeah, it's like encryption stuff. Some of it is one packet of NetBIOS. Who talks NetBIOS or speaks that language? Or what is NetBIOS? Yeah, that is a Windows computer looking for love, is what that is. Only one packet of it there, though. And then 3.3% of it is HTTP. So the catch here is 98% of it was TCP, and when we look down in here, we can account for 1.43, let's just call that 5. 5% of the traffic in that 98 is now broken down. There's a reason for that. If I'm looking to determine HTTP traffic, so HTTP traffic is your web browser, right? How many parts of the packet are actually going to identify as HTTP? Or like be really clear. Like let's take, for example, you're downloading a big image, like a 20 megabyte JPEG for some awful reason. How many packets is that going to take? Yes, many packets, right? So you're downloading this with your web browser. The first packet is going to have what in it? HTTP, what are we going to see inside of there? Let's go on an adventure. Let's see what's inside of there. So let's filter this down to just HTTP. And you notice, actually, Wireshark's being pretty cool about this already. It's like, hey, here's GET requests. So the very first packets are going to have the word GET in them, because when we start thinking about the language that your browser speaks, GET is your browser's way of saying, give me that. All right, here's a good one. So go to packet 457. This is a very particular one, because it's a PNG, and I'm hoping it's more than one packet. If we right-click on it and go follow TCP stream, yeah, okay. It's going to pop up a little dialog. I'm just going to scooch that out of the way for right now. So packet 457, HTTP issued a GET request saying, give me this piece of data. Give me this thing, right? And the server replies. Now, when the server replies, why do we not really necessarily know what kind of data this is? What do we do when packets, like we have huge amounts of data that we want to send over a network? we break it up into little pieces, right? We fragment packets, where we segment them off into little bitty pieces. So we had a GET request from the browser, and we had a response back from the server with probably a 200, okay, here's the data, and there's like, here's some of the data, and it had like the server saying in this, okay, packet number 1 says, here's some data, I'm the web server replying, here's some data. What's that next packet going to look like? Is it going to say, I'm the web server, status code 200, okay, here's some data? It's just going to say, here's some data. So when we look at all those extra packets, when we're downloading larger files, we don't know what they are. So that's why when you open up Wireshark and you just like dive into the middle of something random, like if we come in here and just search for TCP, I have no idea what that is. Well, that's an ACK. So never mind that one. This one. 1,434 bytes. Why is that a significant number for a packet? Or for packet or data size of a packet? What's the maximum size most networks want for packet sizes? 1,500, yeah. 1,500 is a normal MTU for a network. So we have 1,434 bytes of data. The remaining 66 bytes, what do you suppose those are eaten up by? Yeah, all this crap right here, all these bits of the packet, that's probably about 60-some bytes. We have 1,400 or 13 whatever bytes of data, actually TCP data. Well, not quite that much, but either way. That's why those numbers are in there relevant. So what we can tell is whatever is going on right here, this is like we're looking at the middle of a file download right now. We can also guess that this is probably a web server because it says the source port was 80, so that tells us probably HTTP. So this is the first thing when you are playing around in Wireshark is right-click, follow TCP stream. What that is going to do is Wireshark's smart enough to figure out you're in the middle of a TCP stream of data. I can look at sequence numbers. What are sequence numbers for inside of TCP? Yeah. So if you're downloading, like, is your browser, how many sessions does your browser start when it goes to dsu.edu? No. There's so much shit on our website. Your browser doesn't want to just do one session, it does like 50. Downloads the DSU logo, downloads the background. There's some Vimeo logo it's pulling in, like all the different objects. Your web browser will initially get the HTML. That's going to be the structure, and then it's going to say, well, you need to download this image. You need to download this JavaScript file, this like 5,000 CSS files. You need to go grab the Google Analytics. And it'll start firing off sessions for all of those. That's the cool thing in the 90s that made browsers faster, is we started doing more than one session at a time because people's internet connection got faster. So you start lots and lots of sessions all at the same time. So the way your browser or your computer has to keep track of all of those is it's using sequence numbers. 2 sessions sitting side by side will have totally different sequence numbers. So it's able to use those. Basically, the moral of the story here is like when you're taking networking and you're talking about sequence numbers and you're like, great, why do I care? It's because this is how we actually reassemble packets. That's how we figure out what's going on. So if we take whatever that is, right click and say follow TCP stream, it says this is one particular session. So there's actually, yeah, like I said, there are many sessions to this particular web server. This is the one that Wireshark has determined it's session number 3. But did it reuse the session? Yeah, because there's lots and lots of stuff going on. So the web browser's like, okay, I have 3-way handshook with you, DSU. Give me all of these. Now the reason it did that is because it's CSS. Does CSS take a long time to download? No. What is CSS? Like the actual data itself? It's just text, yeah. Downloads pretty fast, especially if it's going to be gzip compressed, which it is. So when we right click and say follow TCP stream, we actually see who made this comment. Get whack CSS module blah blah blah. Actually, that would be a slash, not a whack. What's the difference between a slash and a whack? important technology terms. A whack.
Whack is a whack.
Yeah, whack is a backslash. So anyway, who said this? The part that I highlighted in red. Yeah, there's our web browser. And we can see all of the parts of our web browser. Like we can deconstruct, if you like forensics stuff, like deconstructing data off a hard drive, there's a whole area of network forensics too, to where we can take data and like reconstruct what all is going on. So from this, we can tell, we're trying to go to dsu.edu, Mozilla 5.0. So what is this all telling us here? There we go, Firefox version 27. The thing that we are looking for right now will take any file, but we're specifically looking for a file that has text encoding in it, which is pretty straightforward. And we've given it our preferred languages. What's gzip? Yeah, it's compression that like basically all browsers and web servers support. Can you compress text? Yeah, text is really compressible. You can take like, if you have a zip file with like 10 megabytes of text and you unzip it, like get ready because it's going to get huge, depending on if you use good compression or not. So when we are downloading like a CSS or HTML or anything text from a web server, your web server will gzip it on the fly, usually. There's only one downside to gzipping stuff. There's an upside. The upside is it saves bandwidth, right? What's the downside? Yeah, you're scheduling a lot of CPU cycles to compress stuff. But that's why your web servers will make caches. Like, I've already compressed the CSS file. I don't need to go grab it anymore. Which is why, those of you that have ran a web server at home, you notice if you reboot your web server, your website is slow to load the first time. Because it has to recache everything because it erases its cache. Anyway, blue is coming from the server. We can start learning information about the server. So it's telling, it told the client, like, get ready to accept 8,894 bytes of data. So we immediately know, is this going to fit into one frame or one packet? No. We know that when we're down, your web browser should be like, hey, the file should be this big when we've put it all together. It's telling you what type of content it is, good stuff like that. Telling you it's modified. And cache control. What's cache control? What's your browser telling your, or your server telling your client? Yeah, feel free to hang on to this for a later time. That way you don't have to download it again. So then if we keep going.
Would there be any reason for a server to tell you not to cache something?
There is, and it'll come up in this exact thing. We'll get there. Good question. Yeah, there are reasons why a server will tell a client, like, don't hold on to this. So yeah, right, I mean, this is a giant CSS file. So giant, I zipped by it. Oh, in this particular TCP session, there's actually multiple files being downloaded. So we're downloading now the Discover DSU homepage image, and we actually see the raw text of like, this is the actual encoded data inside of a JPEG file. So you can do all sorts of nasty stuff with that information if you're like man in the middling someone. So we got that much figured out. We can see how TCP sessions get reassembled, and that's why when you look at the whole moral of that story is when you go to statistics and protocol hierarchy, 98% of the files or the packets are TCP, but beyond that, we don't necessarily know what they are. The other cool thing is if you look under the HTTP, you can actually see Wireshark's like, hey, there's some PNG love. Apparently there's an MP4, one packet of MP4, all sorts of stuff. CompuServe GF, that's not one you see very often. So that one's cool. The other one is, if you go to statistics and endpoints, who all is involved in this conversation? So when you go to the endpoints, you can actually see it by layer 2 or layer 3, or even all the way down to individual TCP session endpoints. So trying to figure out, oh, this is still broken, which that's annoying. Assuming you guys have Wireshark on your computers, the name resolution box still broken? Like nothing happens? Does it work? Okay. Maybe I just need to update. I'd actually filed a bug request with, or a bug report with Wireshark because this was broken, so I was curious if they fixed it. I filed a bug report, and then I never bothered to update it on my computer or see if it was ever fixed, because that's how we do it, right? Anyway, so this is clearly broken on my computer still, but when you are clicking it on your computer, assuming you have a newer version of Firefox, what's it doing? It's giving you, not necessarily a host name, I don't think. Well, it depends on what tab you're on. If you're on the Ethernet tab, it's going to give you...
Oh, the manufacturer's method.
Yeah. So that, what it's actually doing for you is an OUI lookup. OUI lookup. Like, have you ever Googled, like, MAC address to vendor or something like that? And you'll find a website that lets you do it. What that's actually called is an OUI lookup. The OUI is like the database of MAC address vendors. Now, for me, I always end up going to the Wireshark one. So since mine is broken, this is the annoying feature, is that I would have to come in here and type 0881F4, because that's what's right here. And, oh, it's a Juniper Networks device. So this comes down to network forensic-y things. If someone has captured network traffic from like inside of an organization, we can start pinpointing like where they are and what they're talking to. Or for like a apartment complex that provides internet or something like that, we can start mapping out the hardware you have, because you're probably not lying. Like your average consumer is probably not spoofing MAC addresses. We know that's not a sure thing though, right? Because you can spoof them, but we can start to figure it out. Same with 98FE, I believe, is Apple, isn't it? 98FE, 90 Apple, yeah. And then E839 is that HP, and then I think the 0021 is Dell. I think. I could be wrong. I'm correct? Oh, it's almost like I've looked at this before. The 98 one, I do know, like, whenever you see 98, or MAC address starts 98, it's probably just Apple. So we see that. We see there are lots of IP addresses that we've been conversing with. The cool thing about this is you can see, like, depending on what you're looking for, you're probably not often looking for like a one packet conversation. Like this is probably the NetBIOS computer looking for love. How about the 255? What's that? Is that a computer? What's the .255, the last mathematical IP address in the subnet? What's it used for? Broadcasts, yeah. So that was a broadcast packet. If we go, we see that whoever 192.168.10.110 is was having a lot of conversation going on. So when we start to look at, this is just an endpoint. So if we go further, we can, oh yeah, here's actually all the protocols that Wireshark can decode. So you can actually sniff Bluetooth. There's also on Windows, you can sniff USB as well, just as a heads up. Whoops, I don't want Bluetooth. Yeah, there we go. Anywho, the other statistic thing is if you go to conversations. So it's one thing to list out all of the individual, and depending on how big your capture is, this might take a second to load. This one's not very big, so it should be fast. But when you look at conversations, it's one thing to see the list of who all is talking. It's even more cool to see who's talking to what. So here we see the Juniper and the Apple device are talking to each other. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? Because it's probably a client talking to its default gateway. So we would expect those two to be talking to each other. At the layer 2 level, though, we can't get a lot of information out of that. So if we go further to IP4, we can start doing all sorts of more fun things. So what's neat is if we want to look at any particular conversation, like we see conversation between 8.8.8.8 and 192.168.10.110. So that's telling us what? Who's 8.8.8.8? It's Google's DNS, yeah. So let's do if you apply as a filter, like what DNS queries was this person making? Now in this case, we're just honestly just creeping on me sitting on my laptop one night long ago. But in the case of finding out like what is this computer we think has malware on it, looking up the DNS information can tell us what? Your average user's DNS stuff is going to be what? Like, is it going to be like real websites? Probably. Like the user went to blah.facebook.com. Maybe there's going to be some Facebook CDN, fbcdn.net. You're going to see some of those. Why will you see fbcdn? Yeah, so like Facebook has distributed, not only do they hoard all of your data, they also make copies of it and distribute it around the world for easy access. That's why Facebook's just the good guy Facebook, right? So you'll see weird stuff like that in there. In the case of like, if there's nasty malware going on, is it going to be going to a really common looking DNS name? No. How does malware usually come up with domain names?
Usually something that looks similar, something legit.
Well, that's to get the user hooked. I guess I should clarify. For the actual phishing part. Yeah, so malware will try to get the user hooked that way. When the malware is actually on your computer and it's phoning home to the mothership, is it going to use a easy, manually, like human-generated DNS name? No. Why not? What happens once we discover a piece of malware is using like whatever.com? What do? The security world. We blacklist the domain, right? We say like, hey, if you're trying to get to this domain name, no go. Eventually, we'll go buddy up with the registrar and be like, you need to cut off this domain name and we'll actually get a seized domain. So you may have found seized domains for other reasons, like they're distributing copywritten material, but there is a pro to seizing domains, and that is this domain was hosting like a malware thing. So usually malware going out is going to be algorithm-generated DNS names. So it's not going to be like a word or something someone would type. It's going to be a mix of letters and numbers that makes no sense at all. So when you see that in there, that's a good way to start looking for bad stuff going on. There's other things I want to go through, but I don't know if we'll end up with time to go through all of that. But anyway, we can see the DNS queries. This is also one of, here we are. If we look at the very first HTTP packet inside of here. Whoops. Yeah, this one. Follow TCP stream. If we look at this particular packet, we see this IP address 5480.141.9. So when we're doing these little investigations like looking for stuff, we might need to go gather whois information about a particular IP address. What's whois going to tell us? Yeah, in the case of domains, it's going to tell us like, yeah, this company bought the domain name. Here's some fake contact information that they provided. It's good stuff. Like if you go look for, KyleCronin.com. And if you look up the whois information on my domain, which there's nothing on my domain, I just bought it because I'm like, no, I don't want anyone else to have it. That's me. So, yes, the contact info. The name is Technical Contact. The organization is some tech place. The street address is a P.O. box that I don't even own in Madison, South Dakota, and this is a Google Voice number that I suppose I still own. I don't know. I certainly don't answer it. So there is, whoever has P.O. Box 201 in Madison, I did own it at one time. They're getting a lot of junk mail for me. Because if you go register a domain and you put in your real information, you're going to start you're going to get on some lists. Not like the government is Big Brother's after you list, like lists of we're going to send junk mail to that person forever and ever. So the other who is kind of information is going to be if we search by IP address. So if I go 5480.141.9. Now, at this point, is this useful at all for me? EC2 5480.141.9.compute-1.amazonaws.com. Do I have the slightest idea what this server is? I mean, I know what the server is, but I don't know, right? This is some VM on Amazon Web Services on AWS. So at this point, I don't have the slightest idea what in the world the client's doing. And we'll talk about the mystery later. So, we'll see y'all next time for more Wireshark love. Ugh.